Welcome to the worst nightmare of all. Reality.
Explore the lesser-known stories of our unknown world. Join the pursuit of the paranormal with Ash and Greg.
Hey Ash.
Good evening, Greg. How are you, my man?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Looking forward to chatting to our guest this week. It is someone that we've been meaning to get on the show for a while. Someone that has basically been kind of a supporter, a friend, a helper, a guide for when I started UFO Identified. Kind of always been there to chat to, comes along to our meetings, comes along to our conferences, and has even delivered a presentation at one of our meetings on kind of subject we're going to talk about tonight. So welcome to the show, Simon Clarke. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you. And I'm now blushing. Thanks for the introduction. But yeah, it's a topic I've always enjoyed. And as you well know, it can be difficult to find people in the right area where you live that look into these sort of topics. So when you set up, it's like, this is something I want to help and support as much as I can. And always happy to help out and happy to share knowledge I've got gained over the years. Yeah.
I think it's important to share the knowledge. Like you say, I wouldn't even know people around by me that are into UAPs. The paranormal, yes, but UAPs, no. So yeah, being able to share information with like-minded people, I think is a really positive thing. And I know since we've been doing the podcast and then coming up to specifically the conference last year, UFO Identified Minicon, to see that many people about like-minded people coming together to talk and share and whatnot. Whereas, say, 10, 15 years ago, you'd be these freaks in the corner that the people would just laugh at. And now we're having the last laugh, it would appear. So, so thanks for coming on to talk. We briefly met, very briefly, at the Minicon when I was selling flogging T-shirts down one end of the merch and that sort of particular area. So yeah, nice to see you again, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me. Definitely, I'm always happy to talk on this. Yeah,
cool,
nice one. So, do you want to give us a bit of a background on yourself and sort of how you got interested in this whole phenomena originally?
Yeah, I think it really started off for Christmas or birthday, whatever. I got a book, Above Top Secret, and I can never remember the guy's name who wrote that. But you read the stories in that, and these are accounts by ordinary FK. But you got it there, have you? Timothy Good.
Where did you get that from, Ash?
Greg gave me this as a present.
But then when you open the cover, it's got a forward by
the library. He stole it from
library. Oops.
What was he called? Lord Louis Mountbatten. There's a story in that book with Lord Louis Mountbatten. Now, with the guy with his sort of heritage, if he says something, you'll take it as being gospel. And from what I can remember, he's one of his, I don't want to call him manservant, I'm trying to think, one of his helpers out on the estate. He said he'd been knocked off his push bike by a strange craft. I don't know how he described it. And when Lord Louis Mountbatten went outside, you can see the cycle track coming down, pointing, it doesn't help, does it? You can see the cycle track coming down towards the house. Then there's a gap, and you can see where the bike landed. There's no other vehicle tracks. And now this is, I don't know, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, whatever it was. And it's like, so that is an actual event witnessed by people. Okay, only the guy on the bike saw whatever the craft was, but people saw the afterwards. There's no other tire tracks around. There's only a bicycle track. And then there's a 15-foot gap and then the bike hits, and then where the guy landed. Something caused that to happen, and it's if that person with that sort of stature says that, then it's got to be right. And you go, what the heck was that? And then being in the Air Force for 12 years, you get a really good understanding of what aircraft look like. What can helicopters do? What can't they do? If you see something sort of flying slowly in the sky, unless you've got a strong wind at your back and it's a helicopter, you're going to hear it. You might hear it a little bit after, but you're going to hear it. Whereas, we sight things. I had one sighting, and there's no sound whatsoever. And it's like, that can't happen. Aircraft do not fly like that. So, yeah, especially once I've left the Air Force, when, again, like you're saying, you don't get ridiculed as much. You start looking into these topics further and further, and you end up going to a big black hole. The first book I wrote, I wrote my first book about 10, 12 years ago, and I just like writing on topics that I come across. So I've got a self-help book. I've had paranormal experiences, um, these things around the world that are just so unusual, but also links around the world. And it just opens this thing up, and it's an incredible topic that I just love being in amongst. And if I can get information from people, their stories, things that occur to them, and I can pass them on to other people, then I just love doing that. I love talking. You may have noticed.
Don't you
You're
think
very,
you
you're
just
very
make
good at it.
you mentioned about you when you start looking into it, you go into this black hole. It's
Yeah.
like the biggest rabbit hole you could imagine. And
Ah,
you
absolutely.
can go down one bit and you go, oh, okay, I'll have a look at advanced military aircraft. Right, let's go down there. And then you go, oh, Lockheed Martin. Oh, where's this going? And then
Yeah.
you end up at some
And
kind
then you
of
get
weird
my
alien thing.
yeah, my alien strange phenomena books are called This Will Blow Socks Off. So the original one was This Will Blow Socks Off. And somebody said to me, well, I've read it, but you're a bit all over the place. It's like, that's the journey.
It's like that, isn't it? It is like that.
Blackbird SR-71, designed in the mid 50s. And you look at that and you go, that has so many unusual aspects on it that really should be there. One of my favorite aircraft,
Yeah,
and
same.
there's things on it that are wrong. And it's like, how did I miss that? How did I miss that all the years? And then, you lead on to things, and it's got, and like you say, you end up now some wonderful long tunnels. Yeah.
And what I like is, I know UFO Twitter can be just the wildest of places, but
Yeah.
you can go on a rabbit hole journey. You can just go into one post, scroll down, see a comment, go into that comment, and it just like
I did that.
tangent
I did
yourself off.
in the first book, Atlantis. Now, I know you've just had a million things running into your mind because you've looked into different things, but as you say, Atlantis, and you go, okay, there was something about Atlantis. Who wrote it? Okay, so we found out who wrote it, but he's referring to what his uncle described that he found out when he was in the Library of Alexandria about 30 years before. He's telling it to the guy that wrote this, who was 3,000 years ago. Okay. And then, and then it starts spreading around the world, and it's like, whoa. But
Yeah.
on the Atlantic point, what so many people don't realize, when you look at the planet Earth, you get a globe and you have a look around it, you try to find out what's unusual, you look in the wrong place. Because 20,000 years ago, the sea levels were 450 feet lower than today. So if people traveling, making roads, doing buildings near the sea, near rivers, they're under 400 feet of water. And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, actually, to you guys at all. In fact, the next time we have a meetup, I'll bring them out with me. I think I've found a harbour in the Irish Sea. This harbour is over 100 feet down. Now, most harbours have these harbour walls. Well, this has two parallel walls about a mile and a half apart. I can't remember exactly what the depth is. It's either 50 meters or 90 meters, and you go like, that's like 8,000 years ago. Who was building that 8,000 years ago? And you look at this on the map and you go, but they are straight lines. Who, how, when? And again, another rabbit hole.
It's insane. It's insane. And talking about
Insane.
it,
Yeah.
they're gone. Sorry.
No, it's insane. It's wonderful, but yeah, you end up with more questions than answers.
Yeah, that's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned about Atlantis and things happening thousands of years ago. I don't know if you've watched that Graham Hancock series of documentaries on Netflix, and he
Oh, has he
talks
got?
about, he talks about ancient civilizations and the fact that around 10 to 12,000 years BC, or 10 to
Yeah,
12,000 years ago, sorry,
yeah,
some cataclysmic events happened around the world, and that's why like a lot of these ancient civilizations are being dated and sort of seem to disappear around that time.
yeah.
And if
The
you're
the
saying,
start the start and the end of the younger Dryas.
that's it.
20,000 years ago, we were in the absolute depths of the last ice age, which we're still in. Come back to that in a minute. Um, and slowly, over centuries, many centuries, the temperature gets warmer for a bit, it goes colder for a bit, but and it slowly starts to rise. Slowly sort of victim starts and it slowly starts to come up until we get to, I think it's 11,800 years ago, when all of a sudden the temperature suddenly drops again. Now, we do get, the planet Earth does get bombarded with various meteorites every day and some comet fragments on a regular basis. Now, some of these are quite small. You're going to get meteoroid shower. Be absolutely great. Stand outside and watch it. You don't need to worry about them. They're just grains of sand burning up. But sometimes there's bigger ones. So, like we saw with the Shoemaker-Levy comet, whatever that was, 10, 20 years ago. So as it flew past Jupiter, Jupiter's gravity pulled on it so much it split the comet apart. And the next time it circled back around again, it plummeted into Jupiter in pieces. A similar thing happened to us. So 11,800 years ago, a load of big chunks hit. I can't remember which way around it is. I think these were the ones in the Atlantic, and they caused the shift in the temperature, which put us into an ice age again. But then as we slowly start to come out of that, we catch up, I think, was it 1,200 years or 1,600 years, something like that, when this comet passes Earth again, more big chunks hit, and these landed in America, and there's actually direct evidence of this. And one of the things that did is it released a load of fresh water from North America. Was that the first? Maybe that was the first one. Released the fresh water into the Atlantic, which stopped the Atlantic conveyor and the Gulf Stream that we get. So that started cooling down the planet. Then when it came back around again, it hit in other places, which helped us to start warming up again. Look into the younger dryas, it's absolutely incredible. But as you say, around the world, Göbekli Tepe is a great example, because here's a collection of buildings, religious, whatever they are, that were purposely covered. Commentary fragments were supposed to hit. It's like somebody wanted to bury it to protect it because they didn't know where they're going to land. Because if they land half an hour later, you're talking, almost like 1,000 miles around the Earth. So you don't know where they're going to land. So cover it up to protect it. But Graham Hancock, he comes up with some absolutely superb information. Now you've mentioned where it is, I shall go and look at his series because I
It's
love his work. I've
fascinating.
read it.
It's
It
fascinating.
really is. Yeah, yeah. There's the island in the Pacific somewhere that all the buildings are made out of those volcanic hexagons. If we go to the Giant's Causeway
Causeway.
in Scotland and in Ireland, I don't know if it's basalt, whatever it is, but as it cools down, it forms hexagons, octagons, whatever these are.
Mm.
But this island in the Pacific is made from these things. About 30 feet long. How do you shift those with a few people? You can't. The weight per foot is more than any one person can handle. And there's like loads of these buildings and the canalways, or was roads when the sea levels were lower. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
So, kind of, you mentioned that we're still in the Ice Age. So,
Yes.
what?
If you go back, if you look at the ice cores over the last 100,000 years, well, if you look at Earth's history, a lot of Earth's history has been an ice age as one we've had polar ice caps, but also we've had times where we're not in ice ages, and there isn't ice caps at the North and South Pole. The sea level is higher, and places like Florida are underwater. So we are still coming out of the last one. And even if you look at the temperatures over the last a couple of thousand years, because when they look at temperature increases or what we're doing to the planet, it's like, no. If you go back to the 1709, there was a huge freeze, definitely over Europe, probably over everywhere else as well. But you had animals freezing to death in the fields in all of Europe, including the UK. We've seen pictures of people ice skating on the Thames River. But then also conversely, you also have times when we've had really hot periods, which is, I think, there was one in the Middle Ages, and I think when the Romans were here, that it was really hot. But when they're digging out Nelson's column, because it's such a high column, it has to have a big deep base. They were digging out layers of hippopotamuses and woolly mammoths and hippopotamuses and woolly mammoths because the temperature fluctuation is so incredible. But I think if you look at the records at the moment, we could be heading into the next ice age within the next 30 years, which probably wouldn't affect us too much. You know, it would hopefully take a few years to really come into effect, but
Well,
the weather constantly changes. Yeah.
yeah, the global warming thing, I know that's a one of a better
Yeah.
phrase, a hot topic, and climate change.
Badum.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm here all week. And but they mentioned, like, say June was the hottest June on record, or
Yeah.
since records began. And that's the interesting thing. When they say
Yeah.
since records began, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but records didn't really begin that long ago. And
1850s want it or something.
yeah, I don't even think it was that far back. I think it was relatively, like, in the grand scheme of things. So we're measuring the greatest temperatures over, say, the last 100 odd years, 150 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of the life cycle of the planet, that's like a mere speck of time.
Yeah.
And it does frustrate me when I know we're going off topic slightly, but the whole man-made climate change, and I get that we're probably not helping, but the fact is that temperatures do go up and down in a cycle over millennia. So
I mean, what I did as part of my talk, which I don't think you were there at, as we circle around the sun at the moment, we go, well, okay, yeah, we circle around the sun. You know, we're now in the northern hemisphere's sun, and we're actually furthest away from the sun. We're 95 million miles away from the sun, and in our winter, we're only 90 million miles away from the sun. So you can say, well, it's 92.5 million. No, it's not. We think, because we sort of think it as being circular. But what happens over time is the circular becomes an oval. So you spend a little bit of time close to the sun and a lot more time further away from the sun. And as that changes, plus a couple of other changes, that's what brings on and ends ice ages. There's a Russian scientist developed it, can't think of his name off the top of my head. Well, there's these three cycles that they interact together as well. Or then the Earth has a wobble. So the more centered the Earth is, I think it only goes about 5 degrees. And it goes down to about 25 degrees. So as we're about 23 at the moment heading back, if the Earth's more vertical, there's a lot more snow. There's a lot more snow and ice at the poles. But the more angled you are, the more it's a warmer climate like we have now because you have the better seasons. Whereas as the angle reduces right off again, the seasons become a lot less.
Makes
So
sense.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, fascinating. So your research obviously when
Goes
reading
all
the
over the place.
talk, it does go all over the place, but it's also, I mean, it's incredible to listen to your talk.
Yeah, thank you.
So kind of talking about evolution, sort of going back to the
Yeah,
planet's past and history's
I
past. So
saw
where does your research take you in terms of like sort of human evolution?
right human evolution. I saw this guy do this one in about 5 minutes, and it's great. 8 million years ago, there's a common ancestor, all apes throughout the world that have been and have gone. 8 million years ago, there's a branch came off, and they became gorillas. The line comes down to 7 million years ago, thereabouts, and um, orangutans come off. And then we get to 6 million years ago, which is our last common ancestor that doesn't exist anymore. And down one line, you've got chimpanzees, and down another line, you've got us. Now, in some reports that you read, they say the difference between humans and chimpanzees is only 3%. But what they don't mention is that we are 60% the same genetics as a banana and 70% the same genetics as a cat. So if there's only like 30% to play with, then 3% is actually 10%. But also, if you look at, now I don't know if it goes for all apes, I think it does. We have 36 chromosomes, apes have 38. And if you look at our first two chromosomes, you can see, and compare it to chimpanzees, you can see chromosome 1, 2, 3. In us, you got 1 is extended, 2 is extended, and then 4, 5, and 6 look about the same. So it's like our second chromosome was split and attached to chromosome 1 and 2. Genetic engineering? And as you delve more if you to get this 3% difference between us and chimpanzees, you have to move a lot of the chromosomes around. And to then get 3%, but if you just line them up, then it's like we're nowhere near the same at all. Something I think I covered in the talk, penile bones. Horses, whales, dolphins, all apes, all monkeys, apart from the really tiny one, all have a bone inside the pelvis that comes out to give them erection. We have a completely different system. How did that come about? Well, I was thinking about this earlier. If you look at all apes and monkeys in the world, they've all had the same sort of time to evolve as us. And there's a couple of fundamental differences between us and them. You know, we've got I can't remember what it's called, but basically we can touch all fingers. You know, most
Those it's
apes.
opposable thumbs or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Something.
yeah. But we do something else, and I don't think many people sort of thought about this. Now, chimpanzees have been seen, and other monkeys have been seen using a stick to prod it into a termite mound and eating them off and whatever. But as they walk away, they drop the stick. We, as far as I'm aware, are the only animals on the planet that carry things. If you found a sharp stone, a piece of flint, that had a bit of an edge on it, and you come across a lion that's taken down an antelope or something, and you manage to scare it off, you get a sharp stone and start taking the skin off. You think, oh, can use that to carry stuff in. So when you finish butchering the meat, and you might have lit a fire or something, all your bits and pieces you'll put into this animal hide and carry it. We take things with us. And it wasn't until farming sort of came in, so we started to stabilize rather than being hunter gatherers, that we really started collecting stuff, which is why now, anytime you do an archaeological dig on something that's newer than about 10,000 years ago, you find pots, pans, tools, fire pits, and what have you, where the human beings have started not just collecting and carrying things, but started creating yet their own things. There was a dig between York and where the coast is. I can't think of this place off the top of my head. and it's where it's the first settlement or the oldest settlement they found in the UK. Now, this place now is a field, but it used to be a bit of land and a big lake. And what they found loads of very interesting artifacts there. But one of the things they found is the people there had built a dock. They'd turned wood into planks and built a dock. Well, this place dates back to 11,000 years ago. How'd you manage that, mate? That takes some intelligence and some tools and some ingenuity. And where did you get it from? Yeah.
Where do you think they got it from?
The most interesting place is Sumeria. The old conversation is, who invented the wheel? Where was the wheel invented? To invent a wheel is very, very easy. It's the axle that's the difficult part. And I didn't think about that. I read it somewhere and I thought, yeah, you know what, you're absolutely right. You can soon make a round piece of wood. That's easy. But how do you mount it onto something that's flat? So you've got to be able to get a piece of wood that you can fasten planks onto to make a cart. Then you've got to do something with the end of the wood to make it round that the cart wheel then goes onto with the hole. You then need something in, you need another hole that you could put a peg in to stop the wheel coming off, and then a bit of animal fat as grease to start it rolling. So that's quite complex. And as far as I'm aware, the wheel was only invented once in the world, and that was in Sumeria, which is also where farming started. And the wheat that we eat today is basically the same as the wheat that they had 10,000 years ago. But there's nothing in the records, and there's nothing in the archaeology when they sort of dig plants up. They go down through the layers of the ground and find all the seeds and whatever. There's nothing there to show how we transitioned from a little plant with a few seeds on, to the sort of wheat that we have today, which is the same as they had 10,000 years ago. Someone showed them how to do that, or somebody brought them the genetically altered wheat to start growing. And it all hinges on Sumeria, this 10,000 years ago sort of timeline, which puts us right into the time just after the Younger Dryas, which is when we get the big sea level changes. And it's almost like that was the last surviving colony from the people that were around previously, as in Atlantis type population of the world. Just my wild guess.
So, if history isn't what we've been taught, it's different. Why do you think that is? Why are we told something differently?
I think that the theory sort of goes, if we understood the actual history of our life on this planet, it would upset so many apple carts. Could big industries lose a load of money? Would all religions suddenly collapse? And if that happened, what would happen to the earth? But why are we not being drip fed this? I don't know. I don't understand. It's like the Bosnian Pyramid. There's enough excavations on the mountain now to make it go, yeah, that's been built. But why is it still being denied? Why not have that as little, as they call them, Easter eggs? We will just open up a page in the real history book and let's have that. As to what's and whys, I don't know why it's been kept from us. For us, it makes life very interesting.
Definitely. I know once you watch the Graham Hancock stuff and I listened to him on Joe Rogan's podcast, fascinating. He was on there. I can't remember the guy he was with, but it was fascinating. And he was talking the amount of flack that he took for this new documentary series, where he's questioning what science has said for generations. And it's sort of, they don't want to admit that they were potentially wrong, because these guys are getting 10 years at university based on following on that narrative that's what it was always like. So that's what it needs to stay like. And we teach everybody that rather than correcting ourselves, because you think over time science goes, well, actually, you know what, eating raw meat probably isn't quite as good as for you as aspartame is the classic one at the moment in the news. Artificial sweeteners. I've been banging on about it for years. But they go, oh, this is the changing thing. This will help people with diets consume less calories, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And now they're coming out and going, well, actually, I'm not so sure it does. So they're prepared to change their views and science changes. But these historians, they don't want to, because it affects tenures and it affects everything. So
I must admit, it's why I love astronomers. They'll come up with a theory on this. There's a little bit of evidence to say that's not quite right. That's fine. We're now going to look at it this way. They are very much prepared to change. Exactly. You know, we didn't think there were planets around all these stars. There's at least one around every single one. We were wrong. Fine. What can we now learn? That's what they'll do. But I don't know if you've ever seen the history of the Rosetta Stone. Thank you. The Rosetta Stone is stone. There was a few of them in Egypt. Now I'll probably get this wrong way around. The Greeks beat the Egyptians and took over Egypt, and they had these stones carved that were in ancient Greek. They were in, I think it was like an ancient Egyptian language, and I think they're in. I can never say this word right. Hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphic. The picture
that word
language. Because we could read the ancient Greek, because we already knew how to do this in the, I don't know if it's early 1900s or the late 1800s, somewhere around there. And somebody's looking at that going, if we can read that and we can sort of translate this and it's the same as that, doesn't that mean this is the same? There was a guy in the UK and there's a guy in France. Both said to their professors, I think these are words. And they said, no, it is just pictures. It means absolutely nothing. And because these two, exactly like you say, they wanted to go against what their professors told them, everyone was telling them that they were wrong. Everyone was telling them they were completely wrong. Just leave it alone. You're mad. And it wasn't until they basically both came out with the same translations that people started looking at it. Oh, okay, you're right. But yeah, if your professor teaches you this, that's what the truth is. But he learned it of his professor and the one before. Before you know it, you're going back 100 years. Science moves on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll listen to what you say, Prof. But now I'm going to open my eyes and see what I can find to advance knowledge. But like you said, they just don't want to do that. There's no evidence in the world of these great travels. Well, that's because you're looking on today's beaches, not the old beaches. No. Sea level, no. There's the guy that came up with the theory of continental shift. And I think it was about 30 years after he died, the tectonic plates. 30 years after he died, when there's enough evidence to go, you know, actually was right. But they're so reluctant to change, they really are. But yeah. I mean, another one that really fascinates me is, I think it's in Pakistan, and it's about 3 to 5 thousand year old. There's a town. As you get excavated down to this town, they found all these skeletons. And all these skeletons are facing basically the same way, as if they've all been blown over. And as they were examining them, somebody decided to test them because I think they found some radioactive sort of material fallout sort of in the area. And these skeletons were high in it. Then they found a report from the similar sort of time. And okay, it was written in different sort of language, but it was basically a nuclear explosion. So someone's describing a nuclear explosion. They're covered in radiation. They're all falling in the same direction. So that looks to be a nuclear bomb. Well, it can't be, can it? They weren't invented until the 1940s. But the evidence, the evidence is exactly what you'd see in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Yeah, but they weren't invented then, were they? Oh dear, no. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I mean it's mad. Like I say, the evidence is there, but they just choose to not sort of accept it or acknowledge it because it goes against their kind of their
Absolutely.
learning, their understanding, their beliefs, which you can understand because like all different religions, and if something did kind of go against what, especially a lot of religions were very similar.
Yeah,
Like it's different names, but it's the same stories and the same
it is.
people with different names.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
get stuff
the
that sort of blows all that out of the water.
one I came across recently, which sort of blew me away. So the King James Bible, I can't remember when it came out. I think it was like 1400s or something. Previous to that, the Ten Commandments weren't commandments. It was the 10, I don't recall them, suggestions. It was like the 10 comments that God said, but they weren't commandments. It's only in the King James Bible that they converted what it was saying to actually have commandments. Because if someone gives you a commandment, it's like a royal commandment. You've got to do it. You can't mess about with it. But if it's just sort of 10 comments that God wrote down, then it's a bit different. But it's how that the ruling class are trying to put the people in the place, so to speak, and just keep them calm and out of the way, unlike France at the moment. But as you're saying with scientists, the when evidence is in front of the face in South America, these elongated skulls, and these things are fascinating. I've got a model one. There's features on the skulls that we don't have, and the skulls in the museums down in South America have been DNA tested, and they're very close to human. But they've also been able to trace the DNA back to the Black Sea, which is interesting because in Turkey, Malta, I think there's a third one, they found caves, underground cave systems cut out of the rock. And these were initially full of bodies, of skeletons. Now, some people say, well, the skeletons, they just put them down there, buried them. It's like, no, these were people falling on top of people, and everything's just sort of, all the flesh is dissolved away and just left the bones. But they all had elongated skulls. Now, they've also found them in the UK, not as elongated, but a bit elongated, um, under under stones near Stonehenge. Now, my sort of theory would be the elongated skull humans were the intelligent ones. Were these the Atlantean type ones? More peaceful, a lot more intelligent. So when they built Stonehenge, the blue stones came from Wales. They carved these blocks out of the ground, dragged them along. Now a lot of people think, well, yeah, country lane, you just need some round logs and no, there's no roads because we haven't got any roads yet. You might get places where, in fact, no, you don't even have carts. So I don't think we had the wheel in the UK over 4,000 years ago. And even if we did, the tracks are going to be no good for dragging these stones along. They said, oh, well, they took them down to the Bristol Channel, put them on boats. Okay, then I'll ask anyone, if you've got a rock that's 7 tons, what size boat do you need? You can calculate it. It's fairly simple. But I'm sure most people I ask would not have a clue how to calculate that. But these people did. Or to assume that these people exist, assume that's the route they took. And then the bigger stones, the sarsen stones, I think it's the sarsen stones, these are like 30 tons and they dragged them for like 10 miles away. And it's like, why? What's wrong with the rock on the ground where you are? Can't you dig it from about a quarter of a mile away, bring it here and just fill it full of earth or something? Why drag it that far? Um, and then there's a couple of channels leading away from um, Stonehenge. They excavated on Time Team a few years ago, and their chief archaeologist went, oh, the water could have done this straight down the hill. Water never, ever, ever goes straight down a hill. It'll always take a meandering route. No matter how steep it is, it'll be meandering somehow. Well, this thing is about 300 meters straight. That's dug and cut by people. Why? But this skull in the UK, the they reckon it was buried for about 1,000 years, dug up, crushed, and then reburied. They didn't like these people for whatever reason. And it sort of seems to say that if they're the peaceful ones or the intelligent ones, that means the round-headed skull ones are the more aggressive ones, which are us. We wipe these people out. But again, like you say, we're not going to hear about this in the history books. I'd love to know the answer. Really would. Really would. Yeah.
So when you mentioned about the Sumerians and that kind of like where sort of maybe agriculture started and
Yeah.
the wheel and stuff, so did they spread around the earth to pass that knowledge on?
Yeah.
So,
I think it's uh, Bright. Is it Bright Ideas? Guy does a YouTube channel, and I was watching one of his recently. There's about 30 locations around the world that has pyramids, and they're all built basically the same. Now we know about these. There's some things I didn't know here. We know in South America there's quite a few walls that these stones have been cut to um, so finely that you couldn't slide a piece of paper in the gap. And these things are 1,000 years old. And some of them, curiously, have these little nubs that stick out that I think could have been used to lift them, but then they normally chisel them off afterwards. Well, you can actually find similar walls to this in Greece and Italy. I didn't know that. Japan, mainland China, all over the world. Pyramids, all over the world. I'd love to have a look at the angles of these pyramids around the world and see if there's any sort of similar sort of concept. And then some of these step ones, sort of measure the heights and the indents of different ones around the world. That would be an interesting study to see how closely they were linked. But it's also interesting that a lot of these places link up to the world energy grid. Now, if people go onto Google, put in the world energy grid, you get a map of the world, all these lines joining all these spots. And generally, wherever these spots are, there is something of interest there. Easter Island is one spot, and I can't remember what it's called. There's the circle thing in North Africa that some people have said is maybe Atlantis. That's under another spot. And these lead on to smaller and smaller lines, which in the UK we call ley lines. And ley lines were investigated, I think that was in the 1800s, by this guy who thought, well, there's like these tracks that go straight. So is it like the easiest way to get from A to B? Well, it's a straight line, but this one goes through a marsh and this one goes straight over the top of the mountain. Why? It's because they're the energy lines and you can follow them and find them. And wherever you get like two energy lines come in or three or four, there's generally something old, Neolithic, whichever, at these points. They've found. Yep.
I was going to say we've spoken which ties in with that there's a place in the UK where ley lines are supposed to intersect underneath, and it's supposed to be a haunted place. Some of the like Skinwalker Ranch, Stardust Ranch, and others in the US are linked by ley lines, apparently. So, yeah, interesting.
Fascinating. I mean, in my first book, Blow Socks Off, I put, what's been invented, what happened in North America, in prehistoric times. Nothing. Oh, was I wrong completely? Which I think I covered in the second book. There was the mound builders in North America. Plus, there's so much evidence of giants over there. Who was it? Was it Captain Cook or was it one of the French ones that sailing around the world and they came across these giants that were literally 12 feet tall? The sailors could walk between the legs without catching the heads on them, without stooping. It's like, how big are these people? But in North America, they build these mounds and they build roads. And these roads are dead straight for like 5, 10, 20, 30 miles. Now, whether they're on ley lines or not, possibly that's why it's easy to make a straight road. But also the Aztecs in South America, they sort of built these palaces in the marshes, and well, why are you doing that? And then they build roads, which they basically had to build up reeds on top of reeds on top of reeds to get a level platform. And then they can build it out with stone to actually build these straight roads. And again, are they ley lines? I don't know. They might be. But why would you need a straight road? You just have a path. Yeah, endless. Love it.
While we're on the subject of ley lines,
Yeah.
like Greg sort of alluded to, where ley lines intersect seems to be areas of high strangeness.
Yeah.
Do you think that is something that is something in itself, that these areas of
Okay.
high strangeness, and is that because of the ley lines?
Yeah. A great book I read. I think my brother bought it for my birthday, and I lent it back to him, and I've not seen it again. And he's describing sort of life from a couple of thousand years ago. St. Michael's Mount is in Cornwall, and you can follow a straight line all the way to East Anglia. And almost every single church on that route is St. Michael's something. You think, why is it St. Michael's? It did describe what they thought it was in the book, but I can't remember what it was. But they also do stone circles. Now, some people say, well, stone circle, it's some sort of an ancient religious monument. Well, in this book, they say, well, no. If you took all the road signs down in the UK and you had to travel somewhere and just headed south on the motorway, how do you know when you get to somewhere? You have to stop and ask someone. And they'd say, oh, yeah, next junction, come off and go right. Go about 20 miles down that road and ask somebody else. And what he sort of alludes to in this book is that your path leads you to the next stone circle, and then you say, okay, I'm going to Preston, or I'm going to Blackpool, or I'm going to Manchester. Which path do I take? So between each of the stones was a path taking different lines. Now I grew up in a place called Barrow Furness, and if you look at, there's two islands there. Well, there's three technically. Two islands, Roe Island and Peel. If you pick on the centres of those two islands, they're actually exactly magnetic north-south. And if you follow on the land up from these, there's like a trough in the land that goes up and curves, and it meets a church on this road. There's no houses near this road. Now, whether there were more 100 years ago, I don't know. But there's just a church plonked in the middle of nowhere. The nearest place is about a mile and a half away. Why that point? Now, there's no road where the church comes up. The opposite side of the road is a church. If you follow that, is a road. If you follow that road on a map, it comes to a castle that's part of a farm. No idea why it's there, and the Broughton Common stone circle. Okay, it needs a lot more investigated. That place does. Um, yeah, just
So the
ley
stone
lines.
circles are like a navigational tool.
That's what this guy was suggesting. Yeah, and you look at it, and the what they called, someone who lives out in the woods by themselves. Can't think of the word. But basically, people would look after a stone circle. So you keep the paths clean, you keep the grass down. But they also had magpies. And what the magpies did is someone would ask the direction, they'd point it, and they'd leave a coin on top of the stone. Magpie would hop over, bring the coin back to the guy, and the guy would give it something to eat. Um, and there's a load of other strange things about birds. It's like pigeons don't run away from people. Just about every other bird will run away. Pigeons are quite happy with people. Were they bred as a social animal? Don't know. Barn owls will only nest in old buildings. It's as if someone genetically altered the owl to be a different owl that would live close to them. If you've got a barn owl that's in a barn on your farm, it'll get rid of most of the mice for you because the mice will eat your corn and seed and what I mean and cause diseases. So that'll look after that for you. So alter an existing owl so it only likes barns, likes being near people, and you read this and you go, could be true. Don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, if we find that, I need to find that book out. I can't remember what it's called, but another fascinating book on again completely different topics. Yeah,
Well, I'd like to take us back a bit to where you were talking about the different timelines of gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and
yeah,
us, and that we've got this DNA that matches to a certain percent. Um, and then you just talked about genetically modifying owls.
yeah.
One up. Who do you think is doing this? So how did we become this different strain?
Yeah,
Because one thing I did note that you said, and it's something that fascinates me as well, is that why haven't the gorillas, the apes, the chimpanzees, who are highly intelligent, um, like hunter gatherers as such, they they will live in communities. They have a
yeah,
hierarchy, and a matriarchy where the female is in charge in a lot of them.
yeah.
Why haven't they evolved like we have? And how come we're different? How did we get here?
I think that we were changed from what most people would see as Bigfoot. If you look back at some of the ancestral skeletons that they've got, the Lake Takana boy one in particular, they reckon this child was between 8 and 10 years old, and he's about 5'8", 5'10". And when you look at the skeleton, you can see how they've hunched the shoulders up to make the hands a little bit higher on the body, because otherwise, if you put the shoulders in the correct place, that the end of the fingertips would have come down into the kneecap. An ape, not a human. So you've got an evolved ape that's intelligent, that might do a few things with stones, that then has its genetics altered, so it's reduced from 48 chromosomes to 46, so that that embryo can now be mated with an alien embryo or the alien DNA to create what they wanted to create, which was not as strong but more intelligent life form. And if we look at what Zachariah Sitchin uh, um, read on the Sumerian tablets, it was the Anunnaki coming to Earth that created us from existing animals. And if you look at the fact that we create things, we carry things, we are so completely different to any other ape in our timeline. We have abilities that nothing else has. And if we look back over the last 200 years, you know, in the 1700s, we weren't a lot more advanced than we were in the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages weren't any more advanced than the Romans were. The Romans were really well advanced. But then you come to like the last 200 years, like the Industrial Revolution and onwards, and the rate of change is just absolutely incredible. So we have to have been altered somehow. There was a skull, it's the Star Child skull of, what's he called? Um, Everything you know is wrong. I can't think of the guy's name. Lloyd Pye, Lloyd Pye. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. But he does a great talk on the Star Child. So this is a skull that was found in a cave. I think it was in South America. And when they tested the DNA, this child actually turns out to be about 30 years old. Had one father and two mothers. They think, well, how could he have had two mothers? Well, if you if you fertilize an egg and put the egg into a different woman, when the child grows up and you check its DNA, it has two mothers and one father because the host's DNA is imparted on the embryo. And actually, quite interestingly, that sometimes as an embryo starts to form, it'll start to split into two but comes back together. So if you see somebody with two different colored eyes, they can actually have two different types of DNA because there was a woman who she'd given birth to 3 kids. One of the kids had kidney problems, so they needed a donor. So she went, "Yeah, okay, I can donate one of my kidneys." And they went, "You're not a match." She wasn't a match to her own child. And now, if it's the father, I mean, that's asking questions. But the mother wasn't a match. It's only when they did several tests that they realised that she had these 2 different sets of DNA in her.
Wow.
So the star child, but then they dated the skull to when it evolved. Well, this skull was, I don't know if it's 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. It doesn't really matter. But hold on a minute, we didn't have the ability to artificially inseminate a person 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. That was only discovered in the 80s. So how did that occur? And also a really good one. I've seen 2 reports. I can't remember if it's Afghanistan or Kazakhstan. 2 scientists decoded our entire DNA, all trillion numbers, whatever it is. And they found there's number sequences in there that are literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then, after these sort of numbers that go, these are now numbers, there's now number sequences in our DNA. Someone put it in there. I thought about this the other day. So many people don't believe in aliens. But just look at us. What we can achieve that our closest relatives can't. The chimpanzees evolved into the animal that they are now 250,000 years ago. We evolved into the being that we are now 200,000 years ago. But we have abilities that, outblast anything. Dolphins play with toys, they play with seaweed. You can show them a shape and then go and touch it on the wall, or a color and then go and do that. Chimpanzees have awesome numeric skills. They can actually read numbers, and they'll put numbers in a chart all mixed up, put it up for a second, take it away, and the chimpanzee can tap that out. But when it's finished with the stick, he doesn't know what to do with it. We are just so different. Something's got to have altered us. Absolutely.
It's interesting because if you look back just over 100 years ago, we hadn't even had manned flight. And the Wright brothers then had the flight.
It was just over 100 years ago, but yeah.
And then within like 50 years, 60 years, we're on our closest satellite, allegedly.
Yeah.
And now we're planning to go to Mars, and SpaceX, and we've got billionaires flying up into space for fun.
Yeah.
We've got the ISS, we've got satellites in space that provide an internet for everybody around the world with Starlink. Yeah. We're putting telescopes out in L2 range.
L2 Lagrange point. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just like, who even knows that?
There's tribes in South America and there's tribes on islands off the coast of India that have never met human beings.
It's insane, isn't it?
Still Stone Age life, but they still gather things. They still hunter gatherers. They might farm some little bits and pieces. They generally do these sort of they burn all the things out of the way, then they plant some seeds. But it's killed off that acre for the next 10 years, whatever, so they move on to the next bit. But yeah, they don't know that people have been living in space for the last 25 years. We have a helicopter flying around on Mars. And like I say, it's only 110 years since the first flight. And it wasn't until the 1930s that we got the first helicopters. So again, less than 100 years. Yeah, we several different. I mean, we've not only got rocket engines, but they now have these engines that you have the solar panels on the spacecraft pointing to the sun. It takes that, turns it into electricity, heats up this gas as it comes out the nozzle to expand it faster so that it pushes it forward. So instead of having to take a fuel and oxidizer, you can take the fuel up and you heat it and it expands. the technology that they're coming up with at the moment is mind blowing. Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned about the Blackbird plane, and weirdly, about 5 minutes before we came on to the interview, I was reading about Blackbird, and titanium was used in the building of this plane, and it was super uncommon. They had to develop new ways to weld on titanium, and they used different like gases to make a stronger weld. And it's just like we've gone from not even being able to have powered flight to now going faster than the speed of sound and retiring planes before they're even been acknowledged by the governments. It's insane. Now, do you think, and you sort of alluded to it, do you think we've been directly interfered with as a species by
Genetically, yeah, definitely, yeah,
by others, by way of helping us or helping them? Are we being farmed essentially for whatever reason? And if you think yes, what is that reason?
I don't
And
know
I
about
mean
being farmed.
and I mean when I say being farmed, I mean it
Yeah.
in like this long-term thing where we're helping them to prolong maybe their species, for example, by being hybrid or
We
whatever.
could be. Yeah, that's way beyond anything I've sort of looked at as to the reasons why someone would turn us into what we are. Why would we continue to be evolved as we are? Why we keep on getting help as we are? No idea on that at all. But getting back onto the Blackbird, so like I said, it's made out of titanium, and one day one of the workers dropped a piece, it just fell off the end of a bench, and it shattered. And they went, "Why did it shatter? No, it should have just hit the ground and dig in the concrete. It should have been absolutely fine. Why did it shatter? Because the heat treatment they were doing on it was wrong. They're designing an aircraft out of material they didn't fully understand how to use, and knew it was going to be capable of taking the heats that it was going to build up at those speeds. It sort of suggests that you've had a craft that you've copied materials from. So in the 1950s, you could get metal, you can analyze it, you can realize what basic elements it's got. You might not fully understand it in the 50s like we would today, and go, oh, this is made of titanium. Well, it flew really fast. We got that on radar that it was flying really fast, and it crashed here near Roswell. So if that flies that fast, we could fly that fast if we can produce the engines to do that and make it out of this material. So my two favorite airplanes, the X-15 and the SR-71, are both designed with these chines on the side. It's like the fuselage comes out the side, and they both have this otherworldly sort of look. And some people have said that the Roswell crashed vehicle looks very similar to those, and on plan form looks very similar to the stealth fighter. And if you read the day after Roswell by Colonel Philip Corso, he describes the role that he had passing items out to industry, basically saying to them, we sort of know what this is, we think. You develop it, you do whatever you want with it. You tell us what uses we can have with it militarily, and we'll give you the contracts for it. But you don't tell anyone how you got it, and you come up with a backstory for the development. In the 1970s, growing up then as I did, transistor radios were the new big thing. TVs without valves in. First TV we had valves in. These were literally like bulbs with wires in and did all sorts of things, and took forever to warm up and produced a lot of heat and used a hell of a lot of electricity. The newer TVs didn't. Transistors don't. Transistors run cool. And if you look at the history of how they were developed, there's two guys and the boss. The boss says he developed it. These two said it was an accident. We're trying to develop something else instead. And for some reason, this was an American company, and all of a sudden, transistors are being made in Japan. And you look at the whole story and you go, it just doesn't ring right. So all of a sudden, Japan's making all of these transistor radios, all of these transistors and all these different electronics. The big boom in the 70s and early 80s in miniaturized things all goes back to the fact they've worked out how to make the transistor. But that wasn't what they were developing. So it really does spark of these things being passed into our production facilities that we couldn't have thought of. Unfortunately, I've not come across anything, even though I've worked in aircraft design for quite a number of years and other design industries. It would have been nice to come across something that was a bit suspect and try and get a backstory on it. But no, the SR-71, Blackbird, and the X-15, the fastest flying aircraft ever, rocket powered aircraft, I suppose. Space shuttle was faster. But yeah, you look at those, and no other aircraft have had that sort of plan form since. Fascinating.
Are you talking reverse engineering?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was going to say, because it's kind of cool we come on to sort of Roswell, because it is pretty much the anniversary of Roswell crash, early July 1947. So I probably know from what we're talking about, but do you believe that that was a genuine craft,
Having been to
non-English
Roswell myself,
crash? Cool.
Yeah, it really was. We and the old cinema there's converted into the museum. If ever you've seen pictures of that, I've been there. Yes, I got a book from the library from the museum. Now there wasn't one UFO flying around at the time. They've been flying around for the last 2 3 weeks. There've been numerous sightings. Then there's the crash. So a tenant farmer who was not quite breaking even. This guy was really poor. It wasn't his farm. He's getting paid to look after the cattle, this rancher, and he wasn't getting paid a lot. Within 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, he drove into town in his pickup, nice new pickup, and was telling people about the new farm that he got. So you go, well, where did that come from if that wasn't hush money? There's also an account of when aircraft go away, you have what you call a flyaway pack. The things that always go wrong, if you've got a big aircraft with like a dozen wheels, you probably need a couple of wheels, wheels, tires, might need a brake unit. You're going to need to top up some hydraulic oil, and stuff. And you have this box that you put the stuff in. So as the flyaway packs are used, the store depletes, and you've got to top the store up when an order comes in. So this guy goes over to go and pop this new stuff into the store, and there's an MP on the door. And says, I'm just going to pop it in there. He says, no, you're not. Yeah, I do. I do this a couple of times a week. I have done for the last year. I go in there and I dump this stuff off. And the guy went, not tonight, you're not. He says, I need to go in there. And the MP just flipped the cover off his sidearm, which I understand as military speak is back off. I've got my orders and I'll shoot you. I know that if an armed guard points his gun at you, you don't start arguing. You back off or do whatever he tells you to do. So there's something in the hangar. There was several flights out on a Sunday. Now, unless the military's changed since 1947, we don't generally fly on a weekend. You work all week. You can get the odd thing, but you don't suddenly get 5 aircraft coming. There's just so many odd things about the place, about about all the reports. There was the local undertaker who was asked, how many child coffins have you got? We need 5. What do you need them for? He's thinking, well, you've had a big problem on the base. I'll come in. And he gets chased off site. Half a dozen armed men picking him up and dragging him back to his car. Get out of sight. You're not seeing anything. And that all just says of cover story. There's something big going off. Yeah, absolutely. These who revealed that one recently? There was It was the National Press Club, I think it was, a couple of weeks ago. Was it? Or was it somebody else? But there's been one recently where they went, yeah, they got like 3 bodies and they got a live one. He died in 1953. Now, when I left Roswell, I was doing a big tour around America, and every day I'd sort of do the map as to where we'd been. And the following night, my daughter was talking to a friend on Sky. She said, well, where were you yesterday, Dad? I went, I can't think myself. I started getting the map out, and I looked at the map and I went, we're in Roswell. Can't remember the following day where I'd been. That's strange. Yeah, that was cool. That was cool. And the moon landings, why would you fake 6 moon landings? Fake one, have it sinking into the thing. We've got out, we've planted a flag, we've run back on board, and we've taken off, we've come back. You could fake that, maybe. But why would you go back 6 times? Why would you do take the rovers up and what have you? Anyway, that's just me.
No, it's very true. So you mentioned your books. I know you got some non-fiction books. You got your fiction books as well. Do you want to give a bit of a plug for them, where people can buy them?
Yeah, if you go on to Amazon, Simon Amazing Clarke. My first book is a self-help book, Self-Help How to Get Started. I have 3 Black Cats, stories on the cats that we had, exploring the 14th century farmhouse that we're living in. Then we have Blow Your Socks Off, which is the one where you follow my journey into this maze. This will Blow Your Socks Off 2, where I've also included a whole section on Bigfoot, but I've also put the section on aliens separate, so it's a lot more logical to read through it. And then I have my Slick Mono Adventures, which are out of this world, shall we say. So yeah, Simon Amazing Clarke on Amazon. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice one. Well, thank you very much. A wealth of knowledge as always, and I'm sure we will chat again sometime. But yeah, thanks for your time, Si. Thanks for.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Always enjoy the company. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cheers.
Pursuit of the Paranormal with Ash and Greg.